In today's conversation, my guest Krista Ranne and I dive deep into the emotional journey of managing trauma and fibromyalgia. Krista's inspiring story of overcoming domestic abuse and thriving with fibromyalgia will leave you feeling empowered and hopeful. From the misconceptions of fibro to the holistic self-care strategies, this conversation is a beacon of resilience. Join us as we explore the transformative power of self-love, setting boundaries, and the healing journey towards emotional well-being. Keep listening for practical insights, resources, and a message of empowerment for anyone facing similar challenges or knows anyone who is. Welcome to The Secrets in the Powder Room, where we share stories and open up conversations about all the secrets women are forced to keep out of fear and shame. I'm Louise Bryant, professional certified coach, intuitive eating counsellor, and trauma-informed domestic abuse specialist and survivor. We're here to support you on your healing journey and help you feel like you're not alone. This is not to be a replacement of your own professional, medical, or legal advice. This podcast contains adult language and content. Listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome. Krista loves to teach about and practice a healthy lifestyle. Krista is an entrepreneur, a single mum with almost 20 years experience, a party planner and outdoor lover. She was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, a chronic condition, in 2018. It had hijacked her life, but now she's thriving. Welcome to the podcast, Krista. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me today, Louise. I'm excited to be here.
You're very, very welcome. So we're going to be talking about fibromyalgia today, and I have respectfully tried to master the way that I say it. So please do pick me up on it or forgive me if I pronounce it slightly wrong, because it is a bit of a mouthful. So how would you get people to pronounce it who are unsure of how to pronounce it?
I'd break it up to say fibromyalgia or myalgia.
Myalgia.
Yeah.
Fibromyalgia.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah, cool.
Or just call it fibro.
Fibro. Yeah. Okay. That makes it a lot easier. Thank you.
Yes.
So can you share with our listeners what inspired you to create Sunflowers and Butterflies and focus specifically on supporting women with fibro?
Sunflowers and butterflies. I came up with the name because they're two of my favorite things. I love sunflowers and I love what they represent. They represent joy, happiness, loyalty, honesty, peace. And butterflies have a deep personal meaning. And a fun little side fact is that the way my life has gone has almost exactly mimicked the butterfly's life cycle in years. So they have days or weeks, I have years, but I think it's still really quite cool. And butterflies are just beautiful. They represent like new life, transformation, new beginnings. And that's all some really good stuff that I want to bring to women with fibromyalgia, because it feels like a death sentence when you've gotten that diagnosis of fibromyalgia. So to have all this hope and love and life, and that's what I just want to share with other women as well. So focusing on fibromyalgia was a natural choice because I have it and I have learned to thrive with it. So like you said, I was diagnosed in 2018. By 2020, I had to quit my job and couldn't work anymore. So I was at home all the time, and that gave me a chance to really learn about the condition itself. It gave me a chance to learn how it affected me and what I could do about it. Because I was pretty young. I was like 38 or 39 when I got diagnosed. And that's way too young to give up your life.
Absolutely.
So I had to find ways to make it work for me. And since we're in 2024 now, so it's like, 6-7 years that I've really learned to thrive with it. And I want to share that with other women.
Beautiful. Well done. Thank you so much for sharing that. So fibro is often misunderstood and stigmatized. So could you maybe shed some light on what fibro is and the challenges that women with it commonly face?
That's a really great question. So first of all, fibromyalgia is a central nervous system disorder, which means it affects pretty much your whole body. It causes the brain to receive about 5 5 to 10 more times information than a normal person. And I put normal in quotations. So any sounds, lights, touches is just so much bigger in the person with fibromyalgia than a person who doesn't have it. And there's a lot of different facets of it that can change quickly. So maybe one day you'll have pain. Maybe another day you won't have as much pain, but you'll be so exhausted. Maybe you've got all of that at once. So some of the more common symptoms of fibromyalgia include chronic pain, low energy, extreme fatigue or exhaustion, sensory overload, and then having brain fog and not being able to concentrate or think well, so you forget what you're doing. Some important things to remember about somebody who has fibromyalgia is she is not lazy. She is not faking it, and she is not looking for attention. Sometimes that's what can appear because there's the common, you don't look sick, but you don't have to look sick to be sick. And it takes just so much more energy to do the simple things. So stress also plays a very major role in the intensity of fibromyalgia and how it shows up.
Yeah, yeah. So lots of women that I've worked with through domestic abuse who've had fibromyalgia, obviously, we will always focus on stress management. Obviously, with domestic abuse recovery, there's a lot of that involved. So, yeah, it's good to know that I'm doing the right thing. So, obviously, not only domestic abuse, but often women that have fibro have experienced some sort of trauma. And how do you think that trauma impacts that? And what maybe unique challenges do survivors face in managing their condition?
So, fibromyalgia is often believed within pretty much the respected medical fields that it's caused by a traumatic event, possibly in childhood, possibly later in life, or early adult, or whenever. But living with domestic violence is definitely a very traumatic event.
Absolutely, yeah.
With a capital T. There's no question about that.
Yeah, there's definitely a big T. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And so there's so much that with domestic abuse that could lead into fibromyalgia. And that's all of the shame and the guilt and the fear and the worthlessness. That all has a part that can feed into your fibromyalgia. Of course, stress makes everything worse in fibromyalgia, in people who don't have it, but stress is just such a big, huge thing. So in order to start managing fibromyalgia well, you need to make peace with your past. You've got to face all of that abuse head on, and it's painful and it's scary and it takes a long time. But to thrive with fibromyalgia, you have to go back to where it came from. And that's likely domestic abuse, right? If that's one of the things of one of your triggers, one of your traumas on how you got it.
So do you think you need to go and deal with each of your traumas? So say, for instance, someone maybe got their trauma from childhood and then they go into a domestic abusive relationship. Do you think they need to kind of deal with the childhood trauma first?
That's an interesting question. I spent a year and a half every week for about 2 hours a week in counseling. And we did talk about my childhood. We talked about the domestic abuse. And then we talked about how I related to all of that. And so, yes, we kind of all did it all at once. Is it all segmented like that? I don't think so, because one just naturally leads into the other. You wouldn't choose a domestic violence relationship most of the times if you haven't already felt bad or haven't already experienced something in your childhood, right? Most times.
Absolutely. So I noticed with my own trauma therapy that although being in a domestically abusive relationship, we don't realise until we go through that, all the stuff that happens before that then led to us allowing ourselves to be treated like that, perhaps. But as you say, not always the case. Yeah. And what would you kind of say to maybe someone who doesn't have the funding, doesn't have the finances? I don't know what it's like where you live in Canada. I know a lot of the women I work with, there's waiting lists and there's only a certain amount of resources that are free, but finances can be a bit of a barrier for people to get that kind of help. So what would there be any kind of advice that you would recommend for that?
I definitely agree with you, Louise. It is hard to get the help you need when you need it, but it is there. It's not readily apparent and you have to kind of dig for it and search for it. I know, because I had to go through the whole, I didn't have a lot of money either. So I had to find ways to get help, and I needed help. I happened to find my counselor through an organization that was funded by United Way. So I paid a tiniest little bit and they funded the rest.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because quite often people will prioritize certain things. I know, like from being a coach, people say, well, I can't afford coaching or I can't afford counseling, yet they can afford to smoke cigarettes or have holidays. So it's about prioritizing, isn't it? And knowing that this is could actually be a really important thing to invest in if you've got some spare money. But there, like you say, there is free resources out there that you can get, or affordable counseling services that it's just worth just seeing what is the priority here, or hiring a coach or buying a program. So definitely, yeah. So what are some common misconceptions that you've experienced with fibro?
So that's a really good question, because there are quite a few, I'd say. Some of the main ones are that once you've gotten that diagnosis, that it's a death sentence, because you have not a lot of energy, you have a lot of pain. So now you're afraid to move, you're afraid to do anything to make it worse, and you treat yourself like you're a glass doll. But it isn't really like that, because, well, for one, I'm living proof that you can do a lot of stuff, even with fibromyalgia. There are some definite major changes that you need to go through and adopt a new kind of lifestyle, but it isn't a death sentence, and it is possible to thrive. So that's one misconception or myth. Another one is, we talked about earlier, somebody is lazy, or they're faking it, or they're making it up. And it's hard to tell people, because you can't show them that you have low energy, and you can't show them that you have pain. So that's hard for people to really resonate with and say, okay, well, if someone's in a wheelchair, you can see, all right, they're in a wheelchair. Yeah, I get it. But you can't tell if somebody who looks like you, but can't do what you can do. That's a hard misconception, because some days she might be okay doing the same things you can do. Other days she can't do anything, even if she could do it yesterday. And people are like, well, you could do it yesterday. Why can't you do it today? Another thing that I've kind of come across is that being under a doctor's care and medicating are the only ways to manage fibromyalgia. And many, many women do choose that way. I personally chose not to, for a few reasons, because I have super sensitive system already. So adding in more pharmaceuticals would have not been good for me. So my doctor and I were able to make that choice to try different methods. And I believe your body's designed to heal. So the more you can help it heal, because we have tons of different ways we can help our bodies heal, because they're designed to heal, I think the better it is for everybody. Because you could go to your doctor and you could get a pain medicine, you could get a depression medicine, you could get a whatever you need, and it definitely won't get to the root cause. And it might make you feel better, or it might not.
Is fibromyalgia curable?
It is not curable, but it is definitely manageable.
And when you say before about your living proof that you can actually thrive with fibromyalgia, what are some examples perhaps of things that you do that someone with fibromyalgia might feel that it's impossible for them to do?
One thing is, I start by getting up every day. And I get up. I have a good morning routine. I have a shower every day. And yes, it was hard at the beginning, but at the beginning, I didn't have a choice, right? I was a single mom, like I said, for almost 20 years now. So I had little kids way back then. They needed me. So I had to get up. There was no option to not. But then I found, as I got up every day, sure, it was hard. It was exhausting. It wasn't fun. But as the day went on, I could do a little more things. I could move a little more, maybe unload the dishwasher, then go sit down for a rest. But if I was lying in bed all day, I couldn't unload the dishwasher even, right? So I could say, yes, I unloaded the dishwasher today.
Yeah.
So just little things like that. But now, way fast forward to where I am now, I was unable to work out. I've always loved being active. And I was unable to work out for about 4 years. And now I'm training to run again.
Wow. That's awesome.
And the last time I ran was in 2016.
Wow. Well, that is inspirational. So, what about any other kind of holistic strategies or coping mechanisms that you can maybe recommend to women living with fibromyalgia?
So again, we're going back to your past traumas. They've got to be dealt with before you can move on and live better. And if it's really hard to find the counseling or support you need, go to the dollar store and get a journal and a pen and start writing it out, because even that helps so much, just getting it out of your system. So that's my very first thing, is go back to the past and get as much of that cleaned up as possible. And then choosing a different mindset, that you're not a victim. You don't have to stay beaten down. You can choose to be a survivor. You can choose to take charge of your life. Bad things happened, but you don't have to let them keep ruining your life now.
I'm such a believer in that. It's just, especially obviously dealing with lots of domestic abuse, I just think no other person deserves to put us in a place where we are constantly suffering from what has happened. You know, that trauma happened, that situation or them situations happened, and for them to continuously beat us down by, you know, I think that success is the best revenge, and, you know, to kind of get out there and be able to not let them, what they've done to you, define you. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. And I just think it's
exactly, because when you stay the victim, you're still giving them the power.
Absolutely.
And who wants that? Really?
No, exactly.
Other holistic things that I do is moving my body, even when I couldn't, even when it was painful, even when I had no energy, just doing something. Even if it was just moving my arms for like a minute, 30 seconds, just getting moving. Taking time to be grateful. That's a really hard thing, and it's such an overlooked thing. But do you have arms? Yes. Can you hug your kids? Can you pet your dog? Can you drink your tea? Like, even just stuff we don't even think about that you can be so grateful for. And that changes a lot when you can start being grateful. And again, healing takes time. It's not going to happen overnight.
It's a process, isn't it? I think even when you haven't got fibromyalgia and you are going through trauma or you've been through stuff, it's a work in progress. Or even just someone who maybe hasn't had any traumas, just has life stresses. I think it is a constant work. We have to put in the work to have a happy life, don't we? When you see the most happiest, successful people, they're doing the work, aren't they? They're doing the gratitude, maybe not consciously, but like it's about, you know, putting all these things, doing all these things and sticking to them and showing up for yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's making yourself feel good, however that is. So it's being around people you love, going outside, enjoying the sunshine, whatever. Like, there's all these little tiny steps are all going to have a big impact.
So the emotional toll of fibromyalgia can be significant. So how do you help women navigate their emotional aspects of the condition, particularly in the context of trauma?
So that's a very heavy question, but it comes to, like, again, go back to your past and get that cleaned up. Like, I cannot stress how important that is, because all that carries with you. Even still, like, I'll notice stuff like, oh, okay, that's from way back then. Okay, I can let that go now. But I'm so much healthier now than I was there. But yeah, you've got to get that past cleaned up.
And what about sort of just handling people, like your emotions? If you're dealing with the past stuff, which is going to bring up emotions anyway. So do you kind of have any tips that you would use for people who are dealing with emotions coming up and having to deal with that? Because if emotional is causing stress and stress is causing pain and making things flare up, do you have any kind of strategies that you use? I know I will do, like, I have sort of meditations that I give people that can help you just feel in them emotions and being able to let them emotions go and honoring the emotions, opposed to like eating or drinking wine or, you know, trying to suppress them emotions. But do you have any other kind of tips or things that you would use or advise?
So emotions are big, they're heavy, they're hard, but they're not hurting you. So when you can understand that they're not hurting you, you can say, okay, how can I love you through this? Because I think if you've experienced domestic abuse and violence and trauma, you don't have a good self-love. So when you can start gently, slowly loving yourself in a way that feels good for you. So maybe that's a hot bath. Maybe it's, like you said, a meditation. Maybe it's a nice cup of tea. Just being gentle with yourself and loving yourself. Not perfectly, maybe, and not always, maybe, but start. What if I loved myself? What if I could choose something loving right now? And all those little tiny things, they all add up.
About any kind of self-talk, do you kind of have any sort of affirmations or positive self-talk that you might say to someone, to some things that you might say to yourself? Or
oh my land, so many. My secret weapon is listening to Insight Timer, because my inside chatter used to be so strong, telling me how awful I was, how stupid I was, how not enough I was. Okay, well, I'm like, if I'm listening to the inside chatter, what if I listen to somebody else's chatter telling me how awesome I am and how great I am? So I've been doing meditations and affirmations for years, and it has made a huge difference. So,
and you said you use a certain thing. Is that something that you
Insight
provide?
Insight Timer. I do have some meditations that I've done.
So Insight Timer, is that what? Is that an app or
app,
something?
yes,
or?
It's my favorite app.
But you've also got some meditations and
a few.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so as a survivor of domestic abuse yourself, how has your personal journey influenced your approach to supporting women with fibromyalgia?
Well, I have been through the abuse. I've been through the recovery. I've been through rebuilding my life. I've been through having 3 major burnouts within 10 years. And I finally learned to love myself. So that's where I've come through. So now I can say, how much stronger am I? How much power do I have now? Look at all the things I have been able to overcome. And so when I can look at that, and then that's kind of what has influenced me to now want to share this with other women. Because you do matter, and you are valuable. Yeah. You are worthy. You're deserving. So don't hold yourself back from all of that.
It's beautiful. Gosh, it's made me go a little bit emotional. Got me my goosebumps. It was lovely. What advice would you give to women who may be struggling with fibromyalgia, and how to advocate themselves and seek proper support and treatment?
So the first thing I would say is, you are an expert on you. You're the one who lives with yourself every day. You know what you need and don't need. And so often, I think we give our power away to other people. But you are the expert on you. So you know yourself better. And if your doctor doesn't take you seriously, there's somebody else who will. Maybe within the same clinic. Maybe you need to go to another clinic. Maybe it's a walk-in. I don't know. But there are ways to find people who will support you and believe you. And then ask also, so as you're an expert on you, ask also to be tested for all sorts of things like Lyme disease, your iron levels. Something as simple as low iron could make all of this a lot worse. You get that fixed. That's an easy fix. And then that can help. So yeah, get tested for other diseases too. It's a long process for sure. I think it took me about 2 or 3 years of testing till we finally arrived at fibromyalgia as the diagnosis. Once we got there, then I'm like, okay, this is what I have. Now I can learn to work with it. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I would say is, you are in charge of yourself, which means, again, don't give your power to somebody else. You're responsible for your own choices now. So you are responsible for how you want to live, how you want to show up, what you want to do every day. It's up to you to decide if you want to thrive or if you want to stay as a victim. Like, those are all your choices. So own those choices, take responsibility for your life, and live the life you want. You don't have to live a bad life. And the third thing that I would say is, fibromyalgia is not a death sentence. One of the things my doctor told me right away was, she said, don't baby yourself, but don't push yourself. So baby yourself, push yourself, meet in the middle. And that was a good thing. It's also learning to adapt to a new kind of lifestyle. So if you got the diagnosis of, let's say, diabetes or heart attack, are you going to change your life for that? Maybe. Some people often do. So why not change your life to suit your fibromyalgia instead? And you 100% deserve to live your best life ever, even with fibromyalgia. So those would be the three things I'd want to say.
Just something that came up for me when you was talking then, and you were saying about, you get to decide the kind of life you want to live. You get to choose how you want to be. How would that kind of impact someone who's got fibromyalgia, who's still in a domestically abusive relationship, who doesn't have that power to decide what kind of treatment they want, to decide where they go, to decide what to do, and they're really stuck in someone potentially who's like, okay, let me use an example of someone I was speaking to quite recently who was speaking to a family member who doesn't believe that her fibromyalgia is real. And, she's just making that up. She's just pretending to have that. She's all right. She doesn't need that extra support. What would there be anything that you could kind of think of that maybe could be helpful for someone who's in that position, that's potentially got people that she are pushing against her having her own decisions or making her own choices, or proving that her illness is actually a real thing?
Yeah. Like, first of all, why do you have to prove that? For one, like, it's real. She is feeling pain. She is feeling low energy. I'd say find better people, but I know it is not as easy as that.
Sometimes when it's your family, and that is it, isn't it? Just have your boundaries and pick who you spend time with, and take on what you can, I suppose, isn't it? And leave the rest. And if they don't believe you, it doesn't matter. You believe yourself.
But then there's, all the boundaries that have to come into play, and all the family dynamics. Like, it's so much. But you always, absolutely. You always have a choice to be treated the way you want, to live the way you want, even if it's something small, even if you're still in domestic violence. You can choose not to respond to that, or you can choose to walk away from an argument. Or they would know their own situations better than me, but I know sometimes I didn't even respond to the argument. Like, no, you don't get my attention right now. Maybe it would have had a backlash, maybe not. But you got to be wise too, right? Like, especially while you're still in the situation.
Yeah. Get support, I suppose, isn't it? Your self-care, like you say, sort of like journaling it out, having a bath, doing the things that are nice for you, making sure that you're doing all of them things to help suppress some of that feelings that you're getting, or that backlash that you're getting. And I suppose having a community, or having a therapist or a coach or a group of people that understand you is also can be quite helpful. It could be very helpful and supportive, can't it, to have that. So do you envision the future of fibromyalgia awareness, and what steps do you believe are necessary to create greater understanding and support for individuals living with this condition?
So fibromyalgia is still it's relatively unknown and often misdiagnosed and often goes untreated. But the same with domestic abuse. The more that we can show awareness to it, the more people will be able to recognize it and appreciate that it is a real thing, that you're not making it up. And the more that you can understand how fibromyalgia shows up in your life, the better you can start taking action to help yourself. So there's a lot of steps, but here I think are the big four that I would suggest is understanding your fibro and how it affects you day to day. That is important, because when you can understand, that's fibro right there, I'm going to just need to have a little rest, or I'm going to need to remove myself. When you can understand that and start advocating for yourself, then you can start healing. The second thing is you need to have a way that you can comfortably and confidently share how it affects you. So I actually did just launch a course called the Fibro Girls Operation Manual, and it's exactly about that, how to tell people about fibromyalgia. It's making an operation manual for yourself.
And would that work for an employee as well? Because what I was just thinking about is, if you was working somewhere and your boss didn't believe that your fibro was real, would this manual help with family and for work? Is that what it's kind of?
Absolutely. Yeah, it could. The point of the manual is basically to say, this is what it is, this is how it affects me, this is what I need. And so you don't have to share it with everybody because it's not everybody's business, but sure, your employer, if they're open to it, say, okay, you know what, after lunch, I get really tired. Would it be okay if I switched my lunch hour? Or if I, most people are reasonable. There are people who are not, so I'm not going to say that everyone is, but most people, when they understand, they can be reasonable.
And I suppose for an employee, so if an employee has this manual and has this way of expressing what they need, there's certain rights that the employee has, don't they, to be able to ask for this stuff. And if it isn't then honoured, then...
Yeah. Like I had to do what I had to do. That was my job. I didn't know about fibromyalgia then, and I had to quit because I couldn't work anymore.
Yeah, I suppose that's a whole nother podcast, isn't
it?
Yeah,
there are other women who work well with it. There's other women who don't work well with it. Like, yeah, they're definitely whole nother podcast. All right. So step 1, understanding your fibro, how it affects you day to day. Step 2, sharing what you need with your people. Step 3 is taking a holistic approach to your healing and health. Because I think that it attacks the root problem, and it has a lot longer lasting effects than just going with pharmaceuticals. And you're going to feel better too. And the 4th thing is be proactive and take those tiny steps, however tiny it is.
Do you take any kind of supplements?
This is all from like getting those tests a long time ago and seeing what was low. So I take magnesium, iron, B12, vitamin D, and natural thyroid. So that's all what I'm taking now.
And that's not medical advice. That's just your personal, what works for you.
No, it was under the care of a natural doctor, not the medical doctor.
Awesome. So finally, can you share maybe a story or an example of anyone that you've worked with, or your own story that could help or inspire our listeners?
So I'll share my own story. I had left my abusive ex-husband when my children were just turned 2 and a newborn. I've had many struggles to heal and to make sense of the abuse. I've had major health issues, which back then we didn't know, but now we know that they were fibromyalgia. I've had 3 major burnouts, and I've been a single mom for almost 20 years. So I've had to look after 2 young kids by myself. I had to get up every day, no matter how I felt. Had to prioritize my own health so that I could show up and take care of my children and give them the best life that they deserved. Tiny actions every day by listening to my body and dealing with the trauma began to get stronger. I began to get stronger. Over time, I had less pain, fewer flares, and more energy. And now I'm thriving with fibromyalgia. So that has been my journey over the last 17 years. And 17 years, so it takes time, but you will get there. And every day you choose a better life for yourself, every day you're getting closer to where you want to be.
So you said it's been 17 years, but you will get there. Are you saying that it will take someone 17 years to get there, or have you been there for a while?
Well, everybody's timeline is different and what they have access to and how they want to show up, right? But like we said earlier, it's always a work in progress. But 17 years ago till now, I'm a totally different person.
I suppose 17 years ago, there wasn't as much understanding of fibromyalgia. And nowadays we have the internet. I mean, it's kind of, when you think about how long we've been able to access everything on our phone, access courses like yours, access the help that's more affordable than paying for a private counsellor, it's more accessible. And when you meet somebody like yourself who's been through that journey and can kind of take you on that journey far quicker than it took you, because you've had to do it all yourself, haven't you? So if someone was to come to you, obviously you can say, right, this is work for people that I've worked with, this is work for me, this is work for my clients, and boom, 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 you can kind of get there a lot quicker than 17 years. So yeah, awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome. So do you have any kind of final closing thoughts or anything to kind of end our lovely chat?
All right. So I do have a few closing thoughts. First of all, stress plays a major role in fibromyalgia. So reducing or eliminating it as much as possible is game changer. Again, heal the past. and it takes time. Loving yourself because you are so worth it, and taking those tiny steps in the right direction every day will add up. And prioritize living well. Those would be my final, everything we've talked about in a little sentence.
And how would anyone get in touch with you or find out more about what you offer?
So the best place would be to go to my website, sunflowersandbutterflies.ca. And from there, you'll be able to access the course that we talked about. I have plenty of free resources that can kind of get you started on where you want to go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking on the podcast. And we would love to have you on again. Maybe we can talk about employment and fibromyalgia like we mentioned before, or something else. But yeah, it's been a great conversation, and I hope people feel like they've had some more light shed on what fibromyalgia is and how they can support someone they might know without fibromyalgia, or support themselves if they feel that they might have it, or if they do have it, if they know they have it. So hopefully this has all been very helpful for you. So thank you once again for coming on. It's been lovely to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Secrets in the Powder Room podcast. We've covered a lot of ground, and I hope you found the conversation as insightful and inspiring as I did. Before we go, I want to remind you that self-care is important, and if you're looking for more support and resources, you can access my self-care course from my website, louisebryant.coach, and keep an eye out for all of my other resources, courses and challenges. And if you can't wait, you can join the Secrets in the Powder Room membership for even more valuable content and community support. All the details are available on the website. Remember, your well-being matters, and you deserve the support that you need. Take care.